Welcome to the Essentially You podcast. Taylor, how are you doing today?
I am doing really well. What about
Wonderful.
you?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited for this conversation. Ooh, girl, it is so juicy. The conversation we're about to have about self-care and prioritizing the right kind of self-care. And I'm holding your book, Inner Workout. I love this. I love the title. I love everything. It feels so nice and so beautiful too. I know you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but man, this cover is so lovely, and I just love how it feels. I would love to ask, Taylor, in your own journey and in your own health journey and your own journey in life, kind of what was that defining moment for you, my dear, that you felt called to really address, although there's so many recommendations around self-care, there's so much stuff around this, around taking care of ourselves, prioritizing ourselves, yet people are not fending any better than they were before this whole healthcare kicked off, maybe even like a decade ago.
It's so interesting because it's in the zeitgeist. Everyone's talking about it, but like I mentioned in the book, it's like, sure, we all can talk about the things we do for quote unquote self-care, but when you ask someone like, hey, when's the last time you really felt cared for? That question is a lot harder for folks to answer. And I think for me, I just kept getting burned out. I just realized like I keep going through the cycle of doing all the things, trying to achieve and check all of the boxes. And then I get burned out. And then I maybe do the thing that at the time, especially when I was starting my journey, like the treat yourself version of self-care, a la Parks and Rec was really popular, where it's like, yeah, you buy something for yourself. It might be expensive, it might not, but like self-care is spending money on yourself, on these experiences or on these things that are supposed to make you feel better. And it might have made me feel better in the moment, but then I was going back into this really stressful life and structure of my life. And so I realized like, hey, this isn't working. And the more I started talking about it, I realized it wasn't just a me problem. Other people were saying, yeah, I'm kind of doing self-care stuff too, but it's not working for me either. And that's when I realized there was a larger shift that needed to happen.
Hmm. I feel that in my bones for sure. And yeah, one of the things I was looking over your book just a second ago, talking about how, there's a one size fits all for self-care by the way that we're talking about it. And that self-care for a mom of four is very different for self-care with someone without even a pet, or maybe one low maintenance pet. You're right. It's not a one size fits all. I want you to speak into that because it is being packaged. I mean, I know that I've talked a lot about it here on the show, and I've talked about it in my books. But man, it majorly shifted for me even when I became a mom. Like it just, the stakes are off. I was just telling somebody on a phone, a friend of mine who doesn't have children, and I was like, listen, nighttime routine, like 2 hours of my night is just getting my toddler to bed. It doesn't matter, 7 days a week, come rain or shine. That is what I do every night, whether I want to do it or not. You know what I'm saying? Like that's just my reality.
Yeah, which is so different from like what you mentioned in the book is when I was referencing the 4 kids, it's like, because my sister has 4 kids and I see like the things that I'm able to do versus the things that she's able to do. And it would be so like presumptuous for me to say to you or to say to my sister, like, you need to do self-care exactly the way that I do it, because then I'm not acknowledging like your context and your reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, how do we look at it in from that spectrum? Is there a way that we should approach it that really fits us? I know when I educate with women, sometimes women tell me like, I'm just trying to go to the bathroom by myself. Girl, I'm trying to go to the bathroom by myself. It's so rare. My son loves to follow me into the bathroom. And so it is a very different ball game. I never imagined I'd want and desire to go to the bathroom by myself until it was a situation where, I was like, this is challenging. Yeah, I've always thought of self-care as a means to survival. That's kind of always how I imagined it, because I've always just felt like for many of my years, I was just surviving. And so I'd love to up level it a little bit, but that's always how I kind of approach the perspective for women is like, what do you need to survive?
I think to build on that, the definition that I use in the
Mhm.
book and in my business is self-care is listening within and responding in the most loving way possible. And I think that expands on your idea of self-care as survival. There's that listening within. So like, I don't have a problem of like going to the bathroom myself because that isn't my reality right now. So if I listen within, I'm not going to hear that desire,
For
but
sure.
that's a desire that you're hearing or that the people that you're working with are hearing. And then that responding in the most loving way possible. It's very easy for us to respond out of obligation, for us to respond out of that person that we follow on Instagram. They're able to do that. And it looks like their situation is the same as me. So I'm going to force myself to respond the way that they're responding. And then the final piece is most loving way possible. We have different levels of resource, we have different levels of energy. And so on one day, what you're able to give yourself, I use the example of like a movement practice. Some days I only have energy to do a little gentle stretching, and that's all I've got. Today I had more energy, so I was doing like a full weight workout thing, and neither of those are better. In both instances, I'm responding in the most loving way possible.
Mm. Can you talk to me about, and I love, gosh, that's the caveat right there. Like that's the hot ticket is in the most loving way possible. That just shifts so much, at least for me. And because I have these ideas of like, okay, I got to do these things to make sure I'm surviving. But I would love for you to speak into, is there a time for us to be checking in, or should it just be something that we're doing throughout the day when it comes to finding what we're needing in the most loving way possible?
Yeah, I really like to think about the big shift that happened for me was moving from self-care being this to-do list.
Mm.
And oftentimes it's like this parallel to-do list to your to-do list of what you have to do at work or what you have to do to be a parent or what you have to do to be in the relationships that are important to you. And then I'm also supposed to do all these self-care things, which if we're being honest with ourselves, it ends up being like this thing at the bottom underneath all these other things we feel like we're supposed to do. And what I've shifted into for myself and what I try to help other people shift into is that self-care is a conversation that we're having with ourselves. We're listening, we're responding, we're listening, we're responding. And think about the way that you talk with your friends, especially like your friends that you've known for a long time, where like you might just kind of be in like an ongoing text conversation with them. Like you send something that's funny, they giggle, they get a little busy for a little bit, they come back with something. You're not making the rules that I need to text my friend at this exact time every day for us to be in a relationship. It's an organic conversation. That's what we want our self-care to be too.
Hmm. Have you found, and I love the organic conversation of just kind of like checking in and seeing what's going on in helping a lot of people, and is it both men and women that you find yourself serving, or is it mostly women that you find yourself serving, or it just all different types of demographics? I don't know, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I would say that for my one-on-one work,
Mhm.
it is primarily women. For people who might show up in workshops or things, also primarily women, but men get sprinkled in there. It's so funny because I don't think the concepts are not gendered, but it's interesting to notice who feels like they are in need of care, and that tends to be women.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just curious just because it's my audience, And so I was just curious in terms of who you found yourself, end up speaking to, or who was really kind of consuming. Have you found when you've been working with the people that you've been working with, even primarily women, that there is a time for them that feels more organic in order to kind of fit in their needs and their kind of that authentic self-care coming into like a loving place? Has there been, like, I know people always wondering like, well, I'm trying to figure out how to do this for myself. Sometimes a framework can be kind of helpful.
Yeah. So there are different ways that you can think about this. I
Mhm.
think what is most important is that you are noticing when it feels like you have energy and you have opportunity. So for me, that tends to be mornings. I'm very much a morning person. I do my best work in the morning. I also am just like the most present with myself in the morning. But I have friends who are like such night owls, and they're like, if I do my self-care practices, if I'm trying to hear from myself in the morning, it's just going to be a jumbled mess. It's a lot better for me in the afternoon or the evening. So your first step, if you're not sure where to fit this in, might just be to kind of track your energy and notice, when do I tend to feel like I've got that breath of fresh air? And then the other piece that I mentioned is the opportunity. Like, if you're a mom who has a baby, it might be during nap time, or it might be when your partner is coming in and taking over, and then you've got some time to yourself. If your kids are in school, maybe it's at a certain point in the school day. It's like, I do some stuff at home and then I have time for this. So it's finding those pockets for yourself. I also think for something that I'll talk about is like, for people who work from home, what are ways that you can kind of give yourself pockets before you transition into working, even though you're working in the same place, to perhaps check in with yourself. Or sometimes even better is as you're closing down your day, so you feel like there is an end to your workday. And even if you go back on your laptop to watch Netflix or something, there's been that delineation.
I love that. You're right. It's, gosh, get in where you fit in, right? Like, kind of check in with your body and then check in with, when's the opportunity. I hear that. I love it. Then the two myths that I was reading about that I love that you were dispelling inside of your book were that self-care doesn't need to be expensive and it doesn't need to take up a lot of time. Those are things that I think a lot of people hear when they think about self-care, is just like, ugh, I don't have 30 minutes to meditate. Ugh, I don't have bubble bath time. I don't, I don't have those, and I don't have resources to go and get a pedicure, or go, shopping with my friends or whatever that may be, or go get some expensive matcha latte at the cafe down the street. Like, that doesn't work. So I'd love for you to speak into, because this is what really fires me up, is like, we can get in where we fit in. We can make this happen for ourselves in a way that's loving. I love that piece. So, how do we think of self-care in a different light? If our mindset goes to like, I don't got the time for it, or I just don't have the expense for it either.
I'm like, which one do we start? Because I'm like you, both of these get me fired up.
Yeah.
So let's start with the expensive thing.
Okay.
It's so interesting for me because, yes, I do run a company that supports people in building self-care practices. And I also wouldn't say I spend all of that much money on like specific self-care products. So many of the things that I do are free or low cost. And I have to remind myself that that's not the perspective that a lot of people are bringing. If you do a Google search or you scroll through Instagram on self-care, there's so many ads. You're supposed to buy this gua sha thing, or you're supposed to do this practice that like requires a very specific mat or very specific equipment. And whenever I'm saying these things, I'm not shaming anyone. Do I have a gua sha? Yes, I do.
Me too.
Is that the main way that I think about self-care? No. So the challenge that I like to offer people is to get really specific about like what makes you feel cared for, and then to play around with it. How can I get to that feeling spending no money? Spending $5. If you want to get crazy, if I was spending $500, how would I get there? But it's really interesting to see that you can get to that feeling and that place of being cared for without spending a lot of money. And society wants you to spend money on your self-care and wants you to think that the only way you can feel cared for is to spend money. So it's a little bit countercultural. It takes some deconditioning. And the goal is not that you're spending $0 on yourself, but the goal is that you're seeing that there's opportunities for you to care for yourself without having to break the bank. So those are my thoughts on the expensive side of things. What do you want to add to that before I go to the other one?
I was going to say, I just 100% agree with you. I would say where the juice is worth the squeeze for me in terms of self-care and honoring my body in a way that feels loving, they're free. It is going to bed earlier, big one, and it is walking outside in nature outside of my house. Those are it. Those are the big ones for me, two of the big ones. And so those are both free as far as I'm concerned. So I am excited to get into, but one, obviously one takes a little bit more time, the walking outside. It's such a yummy experience to be outside by myself. Oh my goodness. And, without toting a toddler or even a partner with me, I'm just like, everybody leave me alone. Um,
Yeah.
but then going to sleep early, it's, yeah, FOMO, you're missing out on something, maybe a conversation or a TV show. But like, to me, waking up feeling resourced is the best thing in the world. It's one of the best ways I can love myself. And so I feel like these don't take it too much time either. But I would love for you to speak into the time piece too, because I think it's the big one that gets in people's way. I definitely, for me, it was my biggest obstacle to self-care when I was growing up. One, I felt like it was self-indulgent. Two, I felt like I didn't
Yeah.
have time for that because I had obligations and things to actually do in my life. That's kind of this negative mindset I had around it. And three, it just felt like, maybe I just felt like I just didn't deserve it.
That is so relatable. And when I think about the people that I work with or the people that I'm kind of speaking to in my work, I classify them in two ways. One is tends to be the strong friend, the person who's like there for everyone else, supporting everyone else, believes that everyone else is worthy of rest, but struggles to internalize that for themselves. The other is this self-aware overachiever who is the person who like loves listening to all of the self-help podcasts, reads the books, probably could write their own self-help book, is always like trying to achieve more and more and more, but is sometimes struggling to either apply what they've learned or to realize like, I'm more than just what I'm doing and what I'm achieving. And the reason why I mentioned those folks, the strong friends and the self-aware overachievers, is because time gets in the way of both of them in different ways. For the strong friend, it tends to be like, ooh, I don't want to spend time on myself. There are all these other people in my life who need support. It's better if I'm pouring into them. And I am constantly, and this is not an original thought, reminding people that we cannot care for others sustainably if we're not also caring for ourselves. Like you can pour a lot into other people for a short term, but after a certain place, you're not going to have anything left to give. And so if your goal is really to be a source of support for the long term for the people that you care about, one of the best strategies that you can do is invest some time for yourself. And we'll talk about in a second how it doesn't have to be a lot of time. For the self-aware overachievers, these are the people who tend to be like, it needs to be 30 minutes, it needs to be an hour, it needs to be a 12-mile run, because they want to hit those milestones to make themselves feel like they're doing enough, that they're good, that they're doing self-care the right way. When we decouple practicing self-care from having the most amount of time and can work through some of our guilt of spending any time for ourselves, what we realize is that any loving response is better than not doing something for ourselves. Because what can happen is we can say, well, I only have 5 minutes to meditate, but I'm supposed to meditate for 30 minutes. So I'm just not going to meditate. It's not worth it. And it's like, well, actually, those 5 minutes of presence with yourself is really valuable. Yes, it's valuable for what it does for your brain. It's valuable for what it does for your nervous system. And so I'm always inviting people to start where you are with what you have. If you have a minute, one of my favorite exercises to do is a 1-minute meditation. You spend the first 20 seconds working on your posture. You spend the second 20 seconds being aware of your breath. And you spend the third 20 seconds being aware of your body, doing a quick body scan. That takes a minute. And when I take a minute to do that, you can do it anywhere. All of a sudden, the level of presence and awareness I have can completely shift my experience. And I didn't need to take 30 minutes to do that. There's a lot of kind of like hustle culture and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps mentality that is paired in self-care is about more minutes, more time, more achievements that can be harmful for our personal growth.
I agree with you there. Like, very harmful. I love the 1 minute, body scan, breath, alignment. Do that. You could absolutely shift your energy. Such a beautiful way. And what are some others? I would love for you to just share a couple other ways that we can really honor our body from a place of loving ourselves in a very short amount of time. Are there some other practices that you share in the book? I know you've got a lot of things in here, but also, and I get that it's everything, everyone's tailor-made. So I get that if you're sharing these,
Mm-hmm.
it may not work for everybody, but it's still so fun to have some examples. Like that one is so potent and powerful. And girl, it is a luxury for me to get 30 minutes to meditate. Now, 5 minutes, I can get that. I can get down with that personally in my life. And I'll take it. I'll take it any day of the week. But even a 1 minute scan and just check in just feels so doable.
Yeah. And that's the point. Like, I sometimes feel like the wellness industry, the way we talk about self-care, can create these goalposts that you feel like you have to change who you are instead of reaching in order to reach that point. And I would so much rather meet you where you're at and say, like, you have a minute? Let's do something for a minute. Or for me, like a lot of times I do shorter meditations because I have ADHD. And so 5 minutes of like coming back to my breath and my awareness takes a lot of focus. And I have moments where I build it up to a longer practice. But for now, 5 minutes is where I'm at. And that's, instead of like being mad at my brain for working differently, I'm really grateful that this is where I'm at. So in terms of practices, one of the practices that I have in the book that is so simple, and hopefully everyone already is doing this, washing your hands, very important for keeping ourselves healthy.
Love
And I
that.
have a practice for like embodied hand washing. How often are we just washing our hands and we're like in such a rush to get it done? But taking that time to be with your hands, be putting the soap on your hands, feeling the water on there, all of a sudden you are in your body in a way that you might not be throughout the rest of your day. So that's a practice that I love to offer up to people. Another simple one, this isn't in the book, is bell listening. And there's all kinds of things where you can hear someone like ringing a bell. I love the Insight Timer app. They have a bell as well. And what you do is you just, if I actually have one off to the side, you have a chime or you have an app that will play a chime, and you just try and listen until you can't hear it anymore. And it's just this moment of focus where you're like, okay, my only focus is the bell, and it slowly fades away. And it's wild how long you can start to hear the remnants of that bell. And all of a sudden, you're a little bit more focused. You're a little bit more present. And that tends to take less than a minute, unless you're doing something that has repeated bells, then it takes a while.
I love that. I love those.
I could keep going, but what do you
keep
think?
going. I mean, I love these because these are also like getting into your body and mindfulness, which are so, so powerful for bringing clarity and energy to the system. Because I'm always thinking like drink water. Or
Yes.
things like that are more, they're not as sexy, definitely a little bit less sexy and more practical. But like that's a big self-care piece for me. Is every morning before coffee I drink here my Stanley cup is right here, I drink this one size of water, and that's my little commitment to myself. And I can do that. Like I can do that. I can drink that. But I love the mindfulness piece because I think a lot of women, yeah, they're drinking the water like myself, but they're torn to so many, they're and headed in so many different directions, you know, at this, and I'm not being mindful. I'm not mindfully chugging that water. I'm chugging that water, looking at my dishwasher, saying I'm chugging that water, thinking, when's my son going to get down here? And I need to have breakfast ready for him. Like these are the things that are happening. I'm not like taking a moment to really embrace this water drinking experience. I'm like, okay, boom, 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 boom. Okay, what's the next thing I need to do? But I drank the water.
Yeah.
I drank the water.
And it's funny that you say that, because I was just leading a workshop with principals, school principals, who like there's always someone who's coming to their office. There's always some other thing that they need to be doing. And one of the practices that I did recommend for them was like a mindful consumption. And many of us are familiar with like a mindful eating practice. And you think like, okay, I eat my whole meal mindfully. I like to encourage people, like, can you just take the first few bites mindfully? Like the first sip of your coffee or the first 3 sips of your coffee after you've chugged your water. Can you just like really notice the flavor, the taste of it? Can you notice it going all the way down your throat? And it doesn't have to be you drink the whole thing like that. It might just be one sip, but all of these practices, and I'm focusing right now a lot on bringing you back into your body, because what I find is that once you're back in your body, all of the sudden you have more awareness on the other aspects of you as well. But when we live too much in our head and we're so disconnected from our body, it's like there's this fracture. And when I can reconnect them, all of a sudden I realize, oh, I'm really tired, or I'm really sad, or other things start to bubble up once I start to refuse that connection, I guess.
Oh, that's so powerful. And I think, so many of us, like, I just resonate on so many levels with that because it's so easy for us to turn it off so we can get it all done. And like, I love that the awareness is a moment of, it kind of triggers up listening. I'm trying to find a better word than trigger because I wasn't looking to use that word, but it
Yeah,
opens the door. How about that? Towards,
love that.
oh, really? Huh? What's going on here? I know part of me had a little bit of resistance of like, I just don't want to know if I'm tired and burned out. Like, what is what does that mean I got to do next? And this is a woman who's I'm a recovering stressaholic. And so, but I love that it opens the door towards really tuning into what your body's needing in a loving way, and then taking cues from that to maybe support yourself in other ways as well.
And what you said was so relatable, which is that like a lot of us don't want to do these practices because we don't want to know. Like I've been there where I'm like, I bet there's some stuff there if I went underneath the surface, but I'm just going to like plug my ears, close my eyes, like ignore it. But the reality is it's still going to be there. And it's like, am I going to deal with this now, or am I going to wait till it bubbles up? And that's the conversation and the negotiation that I have to have with myself, is like, I can't ignore this, but after a while, my body's going to stop whispering and it's going to start getting really, really loud. And it tends to be a lot more uncomfortable when my body's yelling at me. So I'd rather talk to it when it's at a whisper.
I love that. Oh, that is such a massive. There's so many wonderful just nuggets I'm walking away from this, but that is one of the most powerful things here is like, listen to your body at the whisper versus when your body is Mack trucked. You're just like, you have no choice but to listen, and giving us an avenue in how to listen to those whispers, because so often we have a really slick way of ignoring those because it's so easy to do so. So I love that a lot. I love
We're
the
also
body
kind
scan.
of taught to do that and kind of conditioned to ignore ourselves. Like I was just talking about this with someone earlier today, how often we're like, okay, I'll just do one more email and then I'll go to the bathroom. Or I'll just like, I'm hungry, but I'm going to do this one more thing. And oftentimes that's kind of rewarded. And I say this as someone whose husband was like, am I going to have to watch all the time to make sure you don't forget to eat? Like
Or
this is
your
stuff
nap
that happens
time.
to me too.
I read that
Yeah,
he's good about checking on with you with your nap time, that you're not working on your
exactly.
phone.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've not been able to take many naps recently during the day, but yeah, I definitely will be like, I'm tired, I need a nap. And then if he happens to be working home the same day, he'll be like, thought you were taking a nap. Why are you answering email?
Yes, I feel that. And it's so sweet. I love that you guys have that kind of relationship of like gentle accountability, loving accountability, when you are wanting to nurture and honor yourself in a really loving way, that you have someone is like, hey, thought you were heading to bed, at this time, just checking in. I love that. I wanted to just pivot our convo just a little bit and talk about community care and how important
Mhm.
that is, and really defining what community care is and how that becomes a part of the conversation around our self-care.
Well, I think the example with my husband is such a good example of community care. Like community care, I would say, is not all that different in definition than self-care. Instead of just listening within, we're listening to the people that we're in relationship with, and we're finding that loving response. It obviously gets more complicated because I'm having to balance my needs in a relationship, your needs in the relationship, what I have the capacity to give, what you need to receive. There's a lot of intentionality that comes into community care. And what I find sometimes is that we expect every time we're experiencing community care, it should be it should be 1-to-1. It should be even Steven. Like I'm giving you 50%, you're giving me 50%. But if we think about like the fullness of what we need, maybe I'm getting some of what I need from elsewhere. And so I don't need you to give quite as much, but I have a little bit more to give. It tends to be more fluid, more of a negotiation. But the name of the game is 1, communication of what you need. And then 2, a willingness to receive what you need. I find that, again, going back to this archetype of the strong friend, people, especially people who listen to podcasts like this, tend to be the people who are so willing to give. This is myself included. I'm calling myself out, and not as willing to receive. And what happens when we do that is we create this dynamic where we're not actually experiencing community care. And the people, we might be doing something kind for them, but they might not even be feeling fully cared for. They might be feeling patronized, or they might be feeling like this person thinks that they're better than me. So having that exchange is really vital, not just for our own well-being, but for the overall experience of community care.
Mm. So there's some nuance here in the community care. Do you feel like we get better community care from our friends than we would maybe our partners because it gets a little bit more complicated?
For me personally, I
Mhm.
don't think so. I think that I'm really fortunate in that I have like a lot of deep relationships in different areas of my life. So my friends certainly give me some different things than my husband does, but I feel an experience of care of them. I think what it comes down to, and honestly, for a while, I didn't really fully feel like I was experiencing community care from some of my friendships because I wasn't willing to show up vulnerably. I wasn't willing to show up and say, here's what I need. Here's when I'm struggling. I felt like I needed to look perfect all of the time in a way that I was willing to be really vulnerable and open with my husband. So I think the answer is it depends. And a
Mm.
lot of it has to do with, again, our tendency is to point our finger and say, they're the problem, but we have to turn it back on ourselves and say, what am I bringing or not bringing to this relationship? And how is that affecting the experience of community care?
Mm. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense as well. I just was curious in terms of what if there were trends or things that you saw. And I think community care, even based on the definition that you're giving, it feels so important. But and there's a navigation of that relationship as well, as a part of it too. So, there's a lot to grow and build from there. This is probably my favorite question that I want to ask today for you. And how does someone practice self-care when they are responsible for caring for so many other people? I will say that this last month, my sister had a stroke. She was 41 years old. She's 41 years old. She's 2 years younger than me. Since that time last month, I would say almost a month ago, it's just felt like I feel like I hadn't recovered. We had people staying over, family staying over, taking over my son's room. So my son was sleeping with us full time, sleeping with me full time. And I don't know what it was. Like it was that level of really stepping up to advocate remotely for my sister for over a week. And then like family people of staying over. Like I feel like I'm finally catching up. Like I just went downhill very quickly. It's a month, and as a hormone doctor and a woman who knows all these things, it just kind of felt like it was a perfect storm. And it was that I was just caring for all these people all at the same time, and people that I love and I love to spend time with. But man, I'm on the other side of it. Like I've got to take a minute to recover because it just got out of hand way faster than I thought it was going to be. And so, and I'll be honest with you, I was drinking my water. I was checking a lot of my boxes of what I considered self-care, but was really holding the container for so many more people than I normally do. And so I'm like on the other side of this where I'm like, I'm feeling this and I'm in it. And it's been a little while since I've felt like this. And so I know that there are so many women who are always feeling like this or feeling kind of like this more often than not. And so, yeah, I know I feel like we've addressed this already a little bit in that lovingly way of taking care of ourselves. But girl, it feels like I am literally just coming out of survival right now. So I'm really excited for this conversation today because I feel like I was checking the boxes, and but things just kind of got out of hand, when like a higher level of caretaking had to come into play.
First of all, I'm like, I wish I could just, I'm sending you a hug through the
Thanks.
screen because that is a lot to carry. And I'm also sending a hug to anyone who heard that and was like, yeah, that's my everyday life. That is a lot to handle. And we know that like women tend to be the people who carry more of those burdens on a regular basis. We're often caretaking for kids and parents And even in workplaces, we can be called on to take on these extra responsibilities, these more mom-like roles in the workplace. And it starts to be a really heavy burden. The place that I always like to start is just a reminder that, yes, it is heavy. You are not supposed to be carrying this all of the time. That is a burden. And I think the tendency in these conversations can be to like skip over that, like, you're fine, don't worry about it. Here's all these things that we do so that you can handle this all the time. And I just want to be like, no, that's not a normal capacity to have to carry all of the time. So that's the first thing that I would say. The second piece that I would offer is noticing when there is opportunity where you can receive support and where you can call in support. Because again, if you're feeling like you're that strong friend where you have to help everyone else, but no one can help you, there could be things that you're holding on to, but someone would be more than willing to carry. They just don't know that you need someone to hand it off to. And that can be really hard. It's scary to be like, hey, I can't do this all on my own. So community care is the first place my mind went in that place. The final thing that I will share is this concept of like proactive and reactive or responsive self-care. So if you notice that there are these ebbs and flows, and it sounds like for you, this was like a crescendo where all of these things came together at once. You have these practices that you already do. You drink your water in the morning. They're proactive. They're the things that you do that kind of get you to a certain baseline, get you to a certain place of well-being. And deciding on those things, making those things habits before something goes off kilter is really important. The next thing that I will offer is when things go off kilter, you want to have a self-care toolkit. So I've got practices in my back pocket that I know are supportive for me when I get a piece of feedback that I wasn't expecting, when I am stressed out because I have a big deadline to meet. And those are the things that I don't have to think about it when my emotions are high. It's almost like a break in case of emergency. And I'm like, ooh, I've got my weighted blanket. Ooh, I've got this thing over here. Ooh, I have this person that I can call and set up a session with. And planning those things out before you feel like you need them can be helpful. If you're like, I need them now and I can't do it, that's when community care can come in, and you can talk to a friend and be like, I'm really overwhelmed. I've done this with a friend before. Sit down with them. What is everything on your plate? What can go off of your plate? What can someone else do? And like, I've walked friends through that process before because they didn't feel like they had the capacity to do it. And if they were being honest, they felt like everything had to stay on their plate. So they needed the third party to be like, this can go, this can wait. I can do this for you. And it was really helpful for them.
Oh, thank you for walking us through that in such an eloquent and really easy way. And I love the idea of having like when crap hits the fan, like self-care toolkit. Like this is what I do when everything's kind of happening and like something extremely stressful has happened or I'm taking on too much. Like these are the tools that I can pull from. I never thought of having like a, break in case of emergency self-care toolkit to pull from. That's just genius. It's genius. And that it can become so automatic. That's powerful.
Yeah. And I have clients who have like written it down or they put it in their like project management software that they use. I have one client who literally calls it break in case of emergency, and she's stressed out. She goes there and she just reads through the list and picks something.
I love it. No, I would name it that too. I would absolutely name it that. And I just love that idea. Yeah. Cause I know a lot of us are doing whatever the required. I would took my supplements every day. I was eating super healthy. I was trying to take my walks, they were all this, like, I knew the things I needed like to get me, but man, I just was interesting. Like I was like staying afloat, but then slowly kind of starting to go down towards like into the water. Even, some of my baseline practices, they stretched me a bit. They got me through a couple weeks, but man, they weren't getting me through the next couple of weeks. It started to really wear past what my normal toolbox was allowing for. And I was like, man, I don't, these normal tools, they're not cutting it right now. They would have gotten me through half a month, but they're definitely not getting me through a whole month. And so I love that idea of having the, break the glass in case of emergency, but also, and I know this is where a lot of us struggle. At least I'll speak for myself, is that I wasn't asking for any help. I was just trying to keep it all together. And I remember when my husband finally was like, it's visible, like you're falling apart. Like, let me help you. And I remember I was a little bit like, I was in my stuff and I was like, are you really going to be able to help me in this? Like, I just remember, I didn't even receive it well. And it was an old patterning that I found myself into. Like, I was that deep. And, but then my husband took my son for the evening or the afternoon, and I got like this extra 3 hours, which is just a dream. Like, never, again, it never happens. Like, I'm always the one who takes the baby for the 3 hours. And it was that moment that he took my son for 3 hours that things started to shift for me. Like, I was able to get out of my stuff. Cause I had stuff around it too, So I love these tools that you walked us through, but most importantly, like, have a real gut check moment. Like, are you even asking for community care?
Yeah, that is the biggest thing that I find. And I have this matrix that I talk about in the book, the desire matrix. And I find that a lot of us have needs that are not met, and they're not met because we don't express them. Sometimes we don't even express it to ourselves. Like, I need 3 hours to myself, let alone express it to someone else who could help us get that. And a lot of it is patterning around, I should be able to handle this. These other moms can handle this. These other business owners can handle this. Something's wrong with me if I can't handle it. So I'm just going to pretend I don't notice it and try and keep muscling through it.
Yes, 100%. Yes. Ooh, this has been such a powerful conversation. And gosh, I'm just so grateful to you for, your brilliance and your gifting of this gorgeous and beautiful book into the world. Like, thank you. I'm going to have the link to the books. I know it's available right now. Obviously, I have a copy. I'm looking at it right here. So I'm going to link directly to the book. But is there anywhere else, Taylor, that you would love for us to go and find you, to go learn more about you? Obviously, is there somewhere specific you want us to go and get the book besides like somewhere like Amazon or Barnes and Noble?
Yeah. So I would say the best place for you to go is innerworkout.co, not .com. There's a link right there to purchase the book, and it talks more about the book. There's also a link to our free self-care assessment, which, like, if you're at a place where you're like, I don't have extra money to spend on a book, this is something free that you can do. It measures your well-being across 5 dimensions, and it gives you 3 practices that you can try based on your results. There's also a link to our Selfcare Sunday newsletter, which people love. It has like a super, super high open rate because we try to make it valuable for you. And then in terms of where you can stay connected, I'm somewhat on Instagram at Taylor Elyse Morrison, Elyse with the Y. Inner Workout is somewhat on Instagram at Inner Workout. But that's one of the things that I've been doing for my self-care lately, is like not putting a ton of pressure for me to show up on Instagram all of the time. I do it when I feel like I have capacity and when it feels fun.
I love that. I love it. You're working the principles in real time. Thank you so much. I'll have all those resources right into the show notes, exactly where to get the book. I love that you have the assessment. So, so cool. So you can get right to it. Anyone listening right now, you literally get right to it. You go to the website, click the link in the show notes, go there, do the assessment, and get some resources right out the gate. But I highly, highly recommend you please go and get the book. Not only is it gorgeous, but man, it's what we all need. So I just want to say thank you for coming on and sharing your brilliance with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored.